Welcome back. This week on TapRooT Podcast, we're going to be talking about what makes investigations take so long. I'm joined by Tim and Amy.
Alex, I got to jump in right here. I absolutely hate when I hear people talk about takes so long, because what's long? It's almost like walking outside and going, it's cold today, and what's cold to you, cold to me, two different things, and long's the same way. Are we talking 10 minutes, 1 day, 20 years, or what? And then, I'm not done. And then on top of that, frankly, in my experience, when people start talking about, it takes so long, they're not really trying to learn anything. I mean, think about anything that's happened that's significant in your life, or like people's been promoted, or, the person's reached the NBA playing basketball, whatever the case may be. Nothing happens instantly. And anything good always takes some amount of time. So for us to be talking about why do they take so long, I'm a little on edge today. So maybe you can elaborate some.
Great intro. So there's two things. One, and we're probably not going to get into this topic today, but we know that a bad investigation can be done really quickly.
I would absolutely agree, because that's my first knee-jerk reaction. When you're saying this is taking too long, let's get a quick answer, those people driving that, they're really not wanting an answer.
Junk in, junk out.
Junk in, junk out, and deep down they're wanting to know the good old who's responsible for this.
Let's find my scapegoat.
So I'm gonna get away from saying like it's quick and fast, and how do we get these to be so fast that they're not any good. We're gonna avoid that topic of good versus bad. I think Mark wrote a really good article on fast versus good. You can check that out if you want to have more of that discussion. But today's topic is really looking at a quality investigation, and when people are actually doing a thorough investigation, it can feel like it takes forever. And a lot of those are because there's hidden things that people do that make investigations take longer than they should. I'll give an example. Mark and I have talked about this in the past, probably on this podcast, but if you think of like the CSB, Chemical Safety Board, they produce some great videos that you can watch, but their investigations can take like 3 years. Well, anybody that was going to do anything in the industry has probably already done it before their investigations are even reported out. And that's something that's a difference between like a really long investigation. But then we talk with clients, how long should an investigation take? I mean, you've probably gotten that question before. How long should a good investigation take? And what's your typical response with that?
Depends on the incident.
It depends on the incident.
But and Amy will attest to this, what takes the time is gathering your information, which is really what an investigation is. It's gathering information and learning things. And so for people that even ever bring that concept up of length of time to do one, they're scratching the surface a lot of times, in my opinion. I do agree with you, though, and I know you're ready to jump in, but you can stretch some out sometimes. And I can't believe I went off on talking about taking too long, and I'm getting ready to say, and make them take too long. But you can do it. And, in my opinion, a lot of times of what that is people are, I call it the squirrel, they're over here, then they jump over there, then they jump over here, and they don't have any coordination or correlation to how they're navigating through the investigation. Now, you bring up the CSB taking a really long time, but also, too, most times when you're looking at stuff from the CSB board that they've gotten involved with, these are big, major happenings.
Very complex.
Not the operator got his hand in a pinch point somehow or something like that. These are very high consequence type things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. From my perspective, I think management really sets the tone of what's expected here. And if something is important to management, then that rolls down to people and they understand this is important, this is supported, we need to get this done, we need to get it done the right way, if that's the expectation that management has displayed and shown and communicated. So what's management's expectation? That needs to be very clearly communicated. If management wants it done right, then people will do it right and take the time to do it right. If management just wants a scapegoat to get an investigation completed, then that's the type of investigation that's going to be done. And if management wants it done right, you will have your policies in place that spell out how it needs to be done and completed.
Now I've seen some different, we'll call it expectations that management's rolled out before. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I've had conversations with leaders, and they're like, our current time to complete an investigation is 90 days. Mm-hmm. And you're like, that is a long time. I mean, 90, that's 3 months, of doing an investigation. And there are ones that might take that long, right?
Depends on the investigation.
I've got to send out
also,
equipment.
What do they consider investigation complete?
Well,
is it when their corrective actions are installed, or just then they
well,
know?
That's typically investigation. It's not even corrective action complete. But it could be that. But a lot of times, again, if you have to send out equipment to be analyzed, that stuff can take time. Mm-hmm. But we've also seen the opposite, which is within 24 hours, you have to have an investigation submitted. And so there's really big extremes that people are dealing with. And we've got to make sure that we're setting a clear expectation. In our leadership course, we do this by talking about the 3 pizza model. We won't get into this here, but that model is basically talking about, instead of focusing on time to completion, it's looking at milestones, and you're passing different milestones. So, different approaches and different philosophies can make a difference. But I also want to think about, as an investigator, whatever timeline I'm given, whether it's 24 hours or a week or 90 days, there are some things that can make it take longer or make it take shorter. So I've got a little short list here, and I want to get your guys' take on some of these. The first thing I have on here is people talking and not working. So one of the biggest things I see that what makes investigations take a long time is people talking and not working. Now, have you guys ever seen this in your courses?
Of course. It happens in every workplace. Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting for you to expand so I don't, what's the word, get myself in trouble.
Incriminate yourself?
Incriminate myself. Uh-huh. So what do you mean by talking, not working?
So most obvious one would be when you're working on a snap chart. I've seen this in courses, but I've also seen it in actual facilitations and stuff. You'll get a team in the room, and maybe you've got probably either too large of a team. This happens a lot when you get a big team involved in building a snap chart. You have so many people talking about the process, and nobody's putting stickies on the wall.
Right.
Nobody's writing the things down that are being said. They're all listening, but nobody's being the scribe. And so I typically advise people that you need somebody that is focused on actually writing, and you need a facilitator that's focusing the group back on the
Write
task.
it down and get it up there, and you can rearrange it later.
Yep.
Is something that I've had to tell a lot of new to the process people.
Just start getting information up there. Yes, yep. I say that quite often.
But something else that leads to adding time right there is a lot of times people start trying to go through their information and understand what they're looking at and figuring out what the causes are at that step in the process, when really you're just at the process trying to understand, this is what happened, this is what I'm working on.
Well, and you do need to make sure that you are aligned on some things before you get too far down the process. I mean, if you're not aligned on what that incident is completely, you could start going down a path that's going to take you down something where you're going to have to start over again. So you do need to talk a little bit and make sure that everyone's at least aligned on a key thing, like what incident are we looking at here?
Yeah, and there's certainly a level of oftentimes when you're reporting out early phases of an investigation, you'll get management started on talking about things, and that can slow you down. I typically try to do, when I do facilitations, I try to do a report out with leadership each day. And depending on what happens, I might end up being in a longer meeting because they're trying to understand every single piece of evidence. And realistically, when you're in the middle of a big investigation, if I try to explain every single piece of evidence every single day to a new person that showed up in the meeting, those meetings take 2 hours. And that's not really what you want. You really want to focus a team in and say, okay, this is what we covered today. And so things that can take too long, talking and not working, that's definitely one of them. The other one that I can think of is daily work getting in the way of your investigation. So some of those companies that have like that 90-day period, 20-day period, long investigation times, it's because the people that are doing the investigations have to cover their daily tasks. They've still got to go do the pre-job briefings in the morning. They still have to fill out these paperwork and forms that they have to submit every day. So these are the kinds of things that as investigators and as leaders, we need to think about how do we provide support for people during investigations? How do we get coverage for them?
The facilitator of the investigation has to be able to be the facilitator. I mean, you're exactly right. They have to have some things. Amy can fill in for Alex. Alex can dedicate his time to this. And that's really going to help you move as efficiently as possible. Also, too, culture plays a role in it a little bit. Going back to what you were talking about management expectations, I've had facilitations where the primary contact was the COO of the corporation. Mm-hmm. And so this guy was he had dropped what he had done, and he was taking that role of team leader from the company side in the facilitation. And he did that because they wanted to truly understand what's allowing these problems to, I'll paraphrase it, how could somebody walk by this problem all these years? And it never bit us before, but now it bit us, and it was something we could have found long ago. So what's going on in our culture and our management systems that's allowing this to happen? With that higher leadership being that active in it, it was a complicated incident, but it was like bam, 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 because when Mr. Company is running the thing, just like you said, that ownership filters down, that trickle-down effect, and everybody's on board and focused.
People are going to respond to those emails. People are going to show up for those interviews. People know it's a priority when senior management is involved. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I know we're getting you off track about you're trying to work on things that cause to add time, but also, too, that's things to think about on how to make those as efficient as possible.
Well, and the same is true. If you're trying to make things more efficient, having a plan for who's going to be doing it, having the resources to support people that are active in an investigation. If this is a major investigation, that is not something that you can take and do your day job while performing. Mm-hmm. You've got to be interviewing lots of people, collecting evidence, searching through videos and recordings. Like a lot of that takes a lot of time. Building a snap chart for a really complicated incident takes a lot of time. And so if you want a thorough investigation of a very high risk, you've got to commit resources, not just to do the investigation, but to cover for the people involved in the investigation. Because you got to recognize everybody's got a day job, and the safety guys, work doesn't stop just because an incident happened. So how do you provide that coverage for the people doing the investigations? I think that's very, very important.
I still don't like saying that it takes time. What it takes is resources and dedication. The time's the byproduct or the after product of what you invest into that.
Yeah, something else.
I did it. I stumped him.
No, I'm not stumped, but I think about investigations as a broad. We've talked about a lot major investigations. One of the things that makes investigations take a long time as well, or take longer than needed, is when you waste time investigating something that is not worth it. So again, people will, I think, wrongly claim that TapRooT just takes forever. And when you talk about it takes forever, a lot of times what they're talking about is, well, I already know this information and I know it's not worth collecting and doing this because they just stubbed their toe, or they did, they're investigating something that just doesn't make sense. They've set their criteria for focusing on the wrong things. I know there's been a lot of stuff that talks about Heinrich pyramid and, the things that cause slip, trips, and falls don't cause fatalities. But when we think about what we actually should be spending our resources investigating, it's high potential incidents, and it's near misses that had potential to be severe incidents. So people are oftentimes filling out and doing a lot of paperwork for a first aid injury that was never going to be anything more than a splinter in the finger, and not focusing on these potentials where somebody walked under a crane load, or somebody almost cut their finger off but didn't, so we didn't do anything about it. Those are the kind of things that you really could spend your time doing a thorough investigation on and not waste resources. So
here's something a lot of people I don't want to say they don't know how to assess that, what's a high potential or what's not. But I know what I would say to this, but if somebody comes to you and says, hey, what's a hard, fast way I can look at something and evaluate it and know if I need to investigate it or not?
A typical, our line that we use in our implementation book is, if one safeguard had failed, this would have resulted in someone dying or severely injured. And so, that's a good way to assess, is this a potential or not, was there one safeguard in between? Was there only one safeguard? That's a good recommendation. It's not a perfect.
So that's a good one for safety, I think, because I'm glad you say that. But I always kind of harken back to that very simple graph that you came up with and showed me, the probability of recurrence versus the current consequence.
I didn't create that graph, but thank you.
Well, you should have created.
As a basic risk management matrix.
Well, wait a second. I said that you showed me.
Fair enough.
But I really like that one, because it gets outside that health and safety box. So many times when people start talking about high potentials, they throw that net around, and we get kind of hamstrung in the health and safety box. And there's high potentials for compliance issues, quality escapes, environmental, and that I really like that very simple, what's the chance of this happening again, and what's the potential consequence from it? To me, that just simplifies it all. And obviously, if I'm in the lower left-hand side of the graph, I probably don't have anything to learn here, so move on. But as you start, you know the explanation, you know how it works. As you start moving up here, this is stuff I need to be looking at and working on.
Yeah, tripping at this certain point may never be anything more than I tripped and slipped, versus I was walking next to an edge and tripped and hit a railing. Well, now we've got potential.
Well,
for
yeah,
more,
when you're tripping, slipping on Mount Everest, it's a different story.
Yeah. So there's definitely potential stuff. It's hard to quantify. I mean, the risk management community, we'll get people going off if we talk about risk matrices.
Well, good.
But comment below if you hate risk matrices. You can comment those below. But I think there is definitely something to having a good criteria for when to investigate and when you shouldn't be wasting your resources on that. Because I think there's nothing as bad as spending all your resources doing a great investigation on something you shouldn't have been investigating. I think that's a pretty good example of waste. One other thing, and we mentioned this earlier, waiting on outside analysis. This definitely comes into play. If you've got to send something out for third-party evaluation, maybe it's an equipment you've got to get in touch with, you're waiting on a supplier to give you information, a lot of that stuff can eat up time and investigation. And part of that is because their level of urgency may not match your level of urgency. And that can be very painful to deal with. A lot of times if you're doing these kind of things, you need to set a clear expectation with your vendor or supplier on what information you need and by when. But even still, you're at their mercy. Yeah. So that's one of those things that leadership has to take into account, is when we're having to use these outside vendors. Now, you can still set up some stuff for that. I know some clients that they have pre-set up equipment vendors that do investigations. They have some services they purchase where they do like a call an expert, a subject matter expert, and they basically have a company that has a huge list of subject matter experts that will immediately get somebody on the phone like with the next day. So there's things like that where you can get somebody very quickly, and services like that you may look at depending on the type of investigations you have to do.
Well, you brought up our our implementation book already that we actually use in the leadership course when we're talking about that. And really all you can do is just what you said. Try as much as you can to pre-prepare. Like if you've got that subject matter expert already on the payroll, yeah, that's easy to do. But if you can anticipate, I'm going to have to get XYZ onboarded as a vendor. If we do need them, we have everything already set up. I always kind of think about it like the Chick-fil-A model. We as customers going to Chick-fil-A, we're holding them up. That's why they got the kids out there they got the iPad and they're 18 cars ahead in line, But it's kind of reversed. They're pre-planning what they're going to have to be doing to stay as efficient as possible. So really a lot of times you're right. You do have to have those outside resources and things like that. But as far as really all you can do is in your preparation, a lot of times you're not going to change their schedule, their sense of urgency, but if you can have everything set up so that when you do need them, it's to them as fast as possible.
Now speaking of outside help holding up, Amy, why do lawyers always make investigations take longer?
Yeah.
I think that's another podcast, right, Alex?
I think we filmed one recently on that.
Yes. Working with your legal team ahead of time definitely makes a big difference. So everyone can get started a little bit quicker if everyone has that expectation set. You should definitely have those conversations with legal before an investigation so you know what to do.
And having a good relationship with your legal group, I think also helps investigators. Because if the legal group understands the investigation process, that way you're not having to do and explain to them the process while you're doing it. Mm-hmm. You can have that beforehand so they know how they can support it. Because that's what they're there for, is to help support and protect the things they need to protect. And they are a valuable resource as you're doing it. So if you've got them already understanding the process, that's going to speed up their involvement in it, which is important and critical for companies.
Yeah, we've got a fantastic attorney, and Amanda always says, I'm going to start working on this now so you're not waiting on me. So she's got a great attitude and approach to that.
Lastly, something that I think often can bite at you in the butt as you go through investigations is scheduling. And what I mean by this is shift schedules. This can be a really big challenge, especially when you're dealing with off-site schedules or rotating shifts, whether it's day and night, but also a lot of companies that we've worked with, they have people flying into site to work and then flying home, and they're off for 2 weeks or they're off for longer sometimes. That can cause a real problem when it comes to investigators scheduling times to talk with people, getting that information and aligning and getting information quickly, especially if you have the lead investigator who started it leaves and a new person has to come up and pick up in the investigation. All of those kind of things can cause delays in both information collection and also getting to the conclusion of an investigation. So those are...
Well, see, I think you just made a selling point for having the system. Like TapRooT, that's its whole thing. It's built where anybody, if you're TapRooT trained and I'm TapRooT trained and you're starting an investigation and you have to, for whatever reason, go off and I have to come, that's the whole point of it. We're doing it the same way so I can come in and easily pick up where you left off. You may have to have a little bit of conversation, but you're not totally starting over and it's not, well, Alex isn't here this week, so we can't keep going.
Yeah. And that's why having a good snap chart makes a difference too. Mm-hmm. Because if I've put the work in and made a really clear snap chart, you can come right behind and get started versus, if my snap chart has 3 shapes on it and 2 conditions and you're like, well, this has no information. I have no idea what you've collected so far. That can really cause a problem. But it just depends on where they're at in the investigation when you're swapping.
Well, and it truly matters if you've made it your true planning tool. If you've made it that true planning tool, you'll have those assumptions listed and the things that you need to go continue and find. So it makes it an easier turnover process.
And I find it's helpful, I oftentimes use the bottom, so I'll have like my pretty snap chart up top, but I'll have all this junk down below hidden out of there. But one of the things I do is I'll do my 3 Ps and an R, and I'll have the evidence that I'm looking for and what I've collected. And that kind of stuff helps you stay on track and making sure that you're making progress towards, okay, I've done these interviews, I still have these left. I've got this equipment evidence, I still have these questions left. And, if you kind of keep that plan and keep it, organized similarly, people can just come right in and start working. Those kind of things do make a difference, having a good system and a good process, make a difference in there. So I think we've given, some good advice on how to keep it from getting too long. But the best opportunity for learning how to do a thorough but quick investigation, efficient investigation, best way to do that is to come to a TapRooT 5-day course. Public courses available, and we come on site to teach your team. The 5-day course is probably the best one for that, because you're not only going to learn the TapRooT essential elements, but you're also going to learn the major investigation process, all of those supporting techniques that help you organize, and you're going to get a lot of practice. And one of the best things that makes you fast and efficient is practice. And so that course is probably the best one at making you an efficient investigator, because it's got so much exercises and so much practice in it. You're going to get a lot faster at things like the root cause tree and building a snap chart. So
efficient.
If you want to be efficient and not slow and take too long, best place is to check out the link below for upcoming TapRooT courses. And we'll hope to see you there and catch you at the next TapRooT podcast.